Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Renu Tyagi from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. Today we will be talking about the module Aging, Physical and Mental Health under the paper Biosocial Gerontology. The learning objective of these modules are: number 1, to discuss the biological and physiological dimensions of aging; number 2, to describe the psychological health of the aged; number 3 is to explain the different ways through which successful aging could be achieved. Aging is a biological phenomena of growing old that brings changes in the physical, psychological and social aspect. In other words, aging refers to the cell within an organism that has stopped dividing, that is cellular, or to the population, that is population aging. The cause of the aging are ascribed to internal processes or accumulation of the damage, for example DNA oxidation. It thus bears three concepts. First is the programmed aging concept, and second is the concept of damage. The third is the concept of programmed cell death, also known as apoptosis. Physical impairment set in at old age, no matter how healthy a person was during the young adulthood. There is always a difference between being ill and being old because of low functional capacity in an older person cannot be the result of only old age or are part of the old age. When a person stops growing, his body begins to age. Different parts of the body begins to age at a different times. For those who want to work among the elderly, one ought to know the various aspects of the aging process in order to find out the solution to the problems the elderly are facing in the world today. In this module, the change aging brings in the physical and mental health of the older adults are discussed. Now let's see the biological and physiological dimensions. Many research have been done to explain the process of aging. Biological dimensions of aging does not take place alone. It is accompanied by the psychological dimensions of aging as well, which is influenced by the socio-cultural as well as the political factors. Biological aging occurs at a different rate in different kinds of people. All human beings age at their own rate. Hence, we should be aware of the biological and physiological effects because changes in the personality and behavior are mostly due to the dysfunction of the organs. This will influence our approach and techniques in dealing with the elderly people. There are changes in the muscular and skeletal system. Muscular and skeletal system work together. A human being grows with the enlargement of the cells of the muscles and the bones, and maximum size is attained during the early 20s. Aging process leads to the loss of density in the bones and thus ultimately easy brittleness. Joints in the body becomes less mobile, especially in the absence of physical exercise. Cartilage disc between the segments of the spinal column degenerates. Vertebrae come close together, thereby leading to the decrease in the stature and a hunched posture. Due to this decline in the posture, gait changes, resulting in the frequent falls. In some people, cartilage that connects the bone degenerates due to wear and tear that leads to the crippling and is called as the osteoarthritis. This generally occurs in the joints of the knee, hip and the lower spine. Muscles of the skeleton may become flabby and suffer the general loss of the tone and strength, resulting in the poor coordination due to disuse. Muscles may also lose their tone in the bowel, which may result in the perineal constipation. In the same way, muscles of the bladder leads to the infection in retention or incontinence. Now let's see the changes in the circulatory system. The heart pump harder to compensate the decrease in the elasticity of the wall of the arteries due to aging. The passage of the blood vessels become narrow due to the buildup of the fatty deposits when a blood clot cuts off the blood supply to the muscles of the heart. Coronary heart disease or the heart attack occurs. Similarly, stroke occurs when the blood vessel to the brain gets blocked or ruptured. Stroke can lead to the paralysis. Let's see the changes in the endocrine system. Internal glandular secretion made up the endocrine system. The glands of this system secrete hormones that regulate the major functions of the body, such as the glucose metabolism and body temperature. Breakdown or malfunctioning of this system may cause the diabetes, hypertension, etc. Now let's see the changes in the respiratory system. The ability to transfer air from the alveoli to the blood decreases with the age due to the decrease in the elasticity of the bronchial tubes. Smokers have more likelihood of having the episodes of the bronchitis and chronic obstructive respiratory diseases, that is COPD. Tuberculosis, pneumonia and incidence of the lung cancer is much higher among them. Now let's see the changes in the nervous system. In some people, nervous system changes with age due to the loss of the cells of the nerves and the brain. These cells in the brain are never replaced and can thereby lead to the mental retardation. The senses become less sharp and can lead to the senile brain syndrome. Now the changes in the digestive system can be understood with the fact that older people suffer from the poor nutrition due to the lack of the knowledge about balanced nutrition. Low income, lack of activity, decreased enjoyment of the eating alone, loss of the teeth, low income and dull taste and smell. There are changes in the reproductive system as well. There is a decline in the sexual activity with the aging. However, sexuality and sexual needs do not decline with the aging, even though function of the reproduction system stops. Menopause begins between 40 to 50 years among women. Decline in the sexual performance in some males may be due to the fear rather than the actual physical status. Deviant sexual behavior is caused by the chronic brain syndrome, that is, decreased blood supply to the brain. Older women are less charged with this syndrome as it is more acceptable to care for a child than for a man who cannot risk to be called as a dirty old man. But touching is a source of gratification for the elderly as it reduces the feeling of isolation. Let's see the changes in psychomotor performance. Older people have less muscular strength and react slower to the stimuli. It also takes them longer to move and have decreased capacity for physical activities. The period of the time between the stimulus and the response, known as the reaction time, increases with the age, slightly for the simple task but better for the complex task. However, older people perform better than the younger people while doing the complex task. There are changes in the sensory and the perceptual ability. Senses of the sight and hearing gets affected with the aging, leading to poor quality of life. The ability to focus on the near objects decrease with the age. They take longer to adapt to the dark and find it difficult in distinguishing between the level of brightness of light because the retina and the optic nerve are less sensitive. Also, the eyes cannot adjust rapidly to the different levels of the brightness of light. Glaucoma occurs when there is a decay in the optic nerves due to increased pressure on the eyes caused by the blockage in the eye channel. If this is not taken care of, then it may lead to the irreparable blindness. Another eye problem, that is cataract, which is impaired or complete loss of the vision, occurs when the lens in one eye becomes less bright or completely opaque. This may require removal of the opaque lens. Thus, older people need power glasses or large print material, requires a greater degree of the brighter colors and have difficulty in adapting to the darkness. With aging, there is an impairment of the hearing ability as well. Older people are more susceptible to the ear damage due to damage in the auditory nerves. Hearing aids cannot help when the nerves are dead. Denial by the older person that he or she cannot hear can lead to the emotional problems such as accusing others for keeping them out of the conversation, etc. There is a change in the taste due to reduction of the taste buds with an advancing age. This may lead to disinterest in consuming the foods that may lead to the nutritional deficiencies. Further medical advices such as not to take sugar, salt and other spices in the diet make it more difficult to distinguish different tastes of the food. Now let's see some of the psychological dimensions of aging. As one gets old, personality changes appears. Apart from impairment in the physical aspect of the human body, there may be adverse effect on the psychological status of the person as well. But emotional status may not always correspond to physical changes. If the older person is physically and economically dependent, then the problem are worsened. This adversely affects the attitude towards life. A decline in the mental ability determines the psychological age of an elderly. Attitude and behavior of an individual play a vital role in the process of psychological aging. Now let's see the different categories of the elderly. Susan Richard identified 5 categories of the elderly based on their response to the process of the aging. They are: number 1, the matured type, those elderly who are free from the conflict and accept themselves with no regret for the past. Number 2 is the rocking chair type, those who are passive, welcome a change to rest and free of responsibility. The third is the armored type, those who have a highly developed sense of defenses to protect themselves against the anxiety of the aging. Number 4th is the angry type, those who blame others and are unable to accept their status of aging. And number 5th is the self-haters, those who blame themselves and see life as a disappointing. An aged person have more difficulty in the learning process than a younger person. The former are affected by the changes in the brain resulting in the short-term memory, speech disturbances, impaired judgment and slowed thought processes which indicate senility. This is caused due to the shrinkage of the cell in the nerves which is associated with the aging. The elderly demonstrate his ability to think, learn, remember and solve the problem when he or she is not being rushed. Unless the elderly is motivated to learn new things, he or she finds difficulty. The person clings to old ideas and beliefs. They are reluctant to pick up the new ideas. Developmental theories have more relevance for the social practice with the aged. Social problem of the aging lies in the perceived or the disjunction between the individual pace of aging and the uniform social context within which people grow. Social and economic status of the elderly affects his or her morale. Intelligence and vocabulary is same as that of a young person till the age of 50. It may begin to decline after they attain 60 years. There is the change in the memory as well. The memory declines among some people with aging. There is a greater loss of short-term and recent recall as compared with the distant recall. Those who exercise happens retain both recent and the remote recall. The energy required to work declines with the ability to do the creative work later in the life seems to remain with the most people who were capable of it when they were young. The most vital factor in maintaining the mental skill is the environment which makes it to the exercise. The consciousness of the aging is affected by the awareness of the passing years and is often stimulated by the encounters with outside world. The most critical encounter with the aging awareness is the privacy of his or her own thoughts. Even in old age, the old memory of the achievement of life and the respect he or she gained during his or her early life renew their faith in their own competence. When one loses certain things that were once a part of his life, he makes a realistic assessment of himself and enables him to set boundary for the one individual. Security is another important issue. A person gets security from the physical fitness and absence of the disease. Physical environment, economic or financial status, social status, sense of belongingness, purposeful life and human contact. An elderly may feel insecure if he or she lives with someone else and is economically and physically dependent on them, and feels a sense of loss of power and prestige as well. The person may suffer from feeling of loneliness and emptiness when they have no work or after they stop working. Most of the time, elderly person create isolation by distracting people with their tales of achievement in the past. Because of the fear of this boredom, younger people avoid elders, although replaying their past gives comfort to the elderly people. An elderly may feel isolated because of their mannerism, personal inadequacies, hearing defects, living style, generation gap, absence of wife, family or peers. They may feel withdrawn, which could be interpreted as a non-interfering type. There is an attrition of the authority of the elderly in the family decision making. Isolation from the children and peers with the abundance of leisure time may create problem for the elderly. The period of retirement could be seen as a period of inactivity, loneliness and despair. Retirement is a situation that causes the retired person to experience the loss of feeling of confidence and personal worth since they are cut off from participating in most of the activities in the society. With the loss of the productive role with aging, the hurdle elderly faced is to continue in maintaining their self-worth and self-respect. The elderly have both psychological as well as physical problems. They may be physically weak or their organs may be impaired. They may not be able to undertake all the tasks that they have performed during their younger days. Sometimes they may fall sick, or at those times they may feel that they are burdened to their relatives and the friends. They may feel unwanted when their children does not consult them on the important matters that were once carried out only under their consultation. This leads to a creation of a feeling of inadequacy. When an elderly has no house of his own or live a life of the dependency, then their psychological problems get aggravated. Absence of the spouse or desertion makes things more complicated and difficult for them. Sometimes the elderly is engaged in a phase of independence because they think that the life would no longer be worth of anything. However, the biologists are of the view that there is nothing wrong of being ashamed of dependence. The fear of dependency is further aggravated by the bureaucratic procedures and the benefits of the social assistance. Lack of the social contact or interaction with the outside world is termed as the loneliness. The aged suffer from the loneliness and isolation. When they retire, they automatically cut off themselves from their peer group. Due to the demands of the energy, money and the means of transport, visits to their friends and relatives are less frequent. If the elderly is of interfering and quarrelsome type, then they have constraints dealing with their children's family. Their isolation is worsened if they lose their spouse. Everyone cultivates ambitions related to the mental and the physical health, marriage, children, hobbies, religious practices, intellect and creative pursuits during childhood, youth and the adult life. As one grows old, such ambitions are fulfilled to a certain extent and few withers away. Due to certain factors, as one age advances, one may not be able to pursue those ambitions and that may cause frustrations. The fear of decline in the physical and the intellectual capacity lead to the evoke of anger among the elderly people. Anticipation of the decline in the physical ability produce more anxiety than actual decline. Elderly person have less self-confidence than the younger one due to acceptance of the stereotyping. Lack of the social status in a youth-oriented society may make the aged more tolerant toward other low-status group against the fear of dying. The greatest fear among the aged is to become poor. The elderly people are affected by the loneliness and emptiness, which creates a feeling of anxiety. Unhappiness, economic uncertainty, instability or distress are symptoms of anxiety among the aged. Regret for the past life, disheartenment due to the failures and worries about the future are indicators of the anxiety. Anxiety becomes more pronounced when the aged is ill and with no or limited means for survival. It is an age-old belief that the older persons are in low spirit, thus most of the times the problem of the old age go unrecognized. Signs of the unhappiness needs attention in the old age as much as at any point of life. Depression is one of the most common emotions of the distress among the elderly, which is accompanied by the reduced appetite and inability to sleep. Sometimes they express the anger on the people nearby or curse himself or herself. This kind of behavior increases survival risk and may result in the suicidal tendencies as well. Depression is falsely interpreted as sign of senility and it causes the further isolation and behavioral problem. It can be a response to psychological problems and a serious physical disease. Human maturation is a process which goes on continuously. It is very difficult to prove one's worth in old age, but if one reaches a sense of the inner peace and a feeling of happiness before death, then one dies peacefully. The fear of death affects the psyche of an individual. The attitude to death by a person would be determined by their ability to face the unexpected, which is influenced by the two extremes, viz. The concept of preordained fate and the death belongs to life. We all are aware of the death, which is a reality of all humans. It is promoted by the illness, old age, accidents, etc. The aged suffer from the psychological and emotional problems, and this calls for a mental health measures. However, there is no single principle which can guarantee that a person will pass through all the challenges smoothly. The elderly people are haunted by the memories of the successful events in their past, and on the other hand, they cannot cope up with the decline in the physical and financial control. Such people need counseling and psychotherapy. Now let's understand what is successful aging. Clark and Anderson found 5 adaptive tasks among well-adjusted and poorly adjusted old people residing in San Francisco. These qualities were closely associated with the successful adjustment to the age. These are: number 1, attitude towards life. The poorly adjusted elderly hold competitive, ambitious and jealous attitude contrary to the cooperation, self-acceptance and appropriate level of aspiration of the better adjusted aged. Number 2 is the personal independence. The well-adjusted desire for the independence due to pride and not to burden their children, while the poorly adjusted are motivated by the fear than a sense of autonomy. Number 3 is the social acceptance. The well-adjusted seek social acceptance by congeniality, while the poorly adjusted seek acceptance by achievement and superiority complex. Number 4 is resilience. Well-adjusted people can bounce back by handling illness and losses, whereas the poorly adjusted elderly people take their defeat personally. And number 5th is the patience. Women adjust less easily than the men. Old people in their 70s are better adjusted than those in the 60s, since it takes time for the adaptation. Now let's summarize the module. So far we have learnt that aging is a biological phenomena of growing old that brings changes in the physical, psychological and the social aspects. Biological dimension of the aging doesn't take place alone. It is accompanied by the psychological dimensions of the aging, as well as which is influenced by the socio-cultural as well as political factors. During aging, body weight increases, heart pump harder to compensate the decrease in elasticity of the wall of the arteries, passage of the blood vessels becomes narrower due to buildup of the fatty deposits. Breakdown or malfunctioning of the endocrine system may cause the diabetes, hypertension, etc. Older people suffer from poor nutrition due to lack of the knowledge of the balanced nutrition. Loss of teeth, low income, lack of physical activity, decreased enjoyment of eating alone, low income and dull taste and the smell. The ability to focus on the near objects decrease with the age. With aging, there is an impairment of the hearing ability. There are changes in the taste due to reduction of the taste buds with advancing age. The personality also changes with age. Apart from the impairment in the physical aspect of the human body, there may be adverse effect on the psychological status of the person as well. Suzanne Richard identified the 5 categories of the elderly based on their response to the process of aging. An aged person has more difficulty in the learning process than a younger person. The consciousness of the aging is affected by the awareness of the passing years and is often stimulated by the encounters with the outside world. A person gets security from the physical fitness and absence of the disease, physical environment, economic or financial status, social status, sense of belonging, purposeful life and human contact. The elderly people are affected by the loneliness and emptiness, which creates a feeling of anxiety. Depression is falsely interpreted as the sign of senility and it causes further isolation and behavioral problem. It can be a response to psychological problems and serious physical diseases. It is very difficult to prove one's worth in the old age, but if one teaches a sense of the inner peace and a feeling of happiness before death, then one dies peacefully. Clark and Anderson found the adaptive task among the well-adjusted and the poor-adjusted elderly people. These qualities, with the attitude towards life, personal independence, social acceptance, resilience and patience, were closely associated with the successful adjustment to the age. Thank you.